Commander Vextal's scarred carapace caught the dim lighting of Zephyr Station's diplomatic quarter as he made his way through the corridors. His 4 legs moved with the practiced efficiency of someone who had learned to navigate wounded, but his gait carried a weight that had nothing to do with his injuries. 3 cycles had passed since the incident on Earth's third moon, and still the nightmares plagued his sleep cycles. The Kralian species had dominated the Andromeda sector for over 2 millennia. Standing nearly 3 meters tall with natural armor plating and electromagnetic pulse capabilities, they were considered the military elite of the galactic hegemony. Vextal himself had led campaigns against the Zephyrian Rebellion and the Silicon Wars. He had earned his rank through calculated brutality and tactical brilliance that had become legend among the warrior castes. But none of that mattered now. The emergency council chamber buzzed with nervous energy as representatives from 17 different species took their designated positions. Ambassador Talara of the Crystalline Collective adjusted her translucent form in the adaptive seating, her bioluminescent patterns shifting to display diplomatic neutrality. Beside her, General Mordak of the Hegemony's Third Fleet flexed his muscular tentacles, clearly annoyed at being summoned for what he considered a minor briefing. "This better be worth interrupting my battle preparations." Mordak growled through his vocal slits. The human homeworld won't conquer itself, and High Command expects results within the next cycle. Vextal positioned himself at the center of the circular chamber, his battle-worn form a stark contrast to the pristine diplomatic setting. The lighting system automatically adjusted to accommodate his species' visual spectrum, casting everything in the amber glow that Kralians found comfortable. He activated his personal holographic display, showing a blue-green planet that looked deceptively peaceful from orbit. "Earth," he announced, his voice carrying across the chamber's acoustic enhancement field. "Third planet in a system they call Sol. Population approximately 8 billion. Technologically primitive by our standards, having only achieved nuclear fission and basic space travel to their immediate planetary neighbors." Senator Quillman of the Avian Confederacy ruffled his metallic feathers dismissively. "Then why waste our time? A standard subjugation protocol should suffice. Send in the advanced scouts, establish orbital superiority, demand surrender. If they resist, a few demonstration bombardments usually convince primitives to see reason." That, Vextal said quietly, is exactly what we thought. The holographic display shifted to show tactical readouts from 3 months earlier. Fleet positions, patrol routes, and assessment reports filled the air around them. The data painted a picture of routine military efficiency, the kind of operation the hegemony had executed thousands of times across the galaxy. Initial reconnaissance suggested humans were a typical developing species. Vextal continued. Divided into competing political factions, limited to their homeworld and a few small installations on nearby celestial bodies. Intelligence reports indicated they spent more resources fighting among themselves than advancing their technology. Perfect candidates for integration into the hegemony's workforce. Dr. Porco Headsfree. Yilson, the hegemony's chief xenobiologist, projected her own data alongside Vextal's tactical information. Her insectoid features clicked with academic precision as she spoke. Biological scans confirmed they were persistence hunters evolved from pack predators, but nothing extraordinary. Standard bipedal form, carbon-based biology, limited physical capabilities compared to most spacefaring species. Their bone density was adequate, their muscle fiber efficiency reasonable, but certainly nothing that warranted special protocols. "We assigned it threat level Omega-7, General Mordak added with growing impatience. Same classification as the Trill homeworld before integration. A simple show of force operation. Vextal's electromagnetic field flickered with something that might have been amusement, if Kralians were capable of finding anything about their current situation amusing. "I led the advanced reconnaissance team personally. 12 of our finest stealth ships, equipped with the latest sensor arrays and cloaking technology. Our mission was straightforward: establish observation posts on their moon, monitor their communications, identify key political and military leaders, and prepare detailed invasion plans." The holographic display zoomed in on Earth's moon, showing the positioning of hegemony observation posts. Hidden bases carved into crater walls, sensor networks disguised as natural rock formations, and communication arrays that could monitor every electromagnetic signal emanating from the human homeworld. It was a masterpiece of covert military operation, the kind of setup that had preceded successful conquests across 3 galaxy arms. For 6 weeks, everything proceeded exactly as expected. Vextal continued. We catalogued their military capabilities, which were laughably primitive. Chemical rockets, nuclear weapons that couldn't breach our basic shielding. Aircraft that moved at speeds our cargo haulers could easily outmaneuver. Their most advanced computers possessed less processing power than a standard hegemony field ration dispenser. Ambassador Talara's crystalline form brightened with curiosity. So what changed? If they were so technologically inferior, what could possibly have gone wrong? Vexthal's four eyes focused on distant memories, and when he spoke again, his voice carried a weight that made several representatives lean forward unconsciously. They noticed us. Impossible, Dr. Yielson clicked dismissively. Hegemony stealth technology is undetectable by primitive sensor arrays. We've tested it against civilizations far more advanced than these humans. That's what we thought too, Vexthal replied. Our first indication that something was wrong came when observation post data reported unusual human activity around their landing sites. Groups of humans were arriving at locations near our hidden bases, claiming to be conducting scientific research or recreational activities. At first, we dismissed it as coincidence. The tactical display showed heat signatures and movement patterns around the lunar observation posts. What should have been an empty lunar landscape was dotted with human presence indicators, growing more frequent with each passing day.
Then we intercepted their communications,
Vexthal continued. They weren't conducting random research, they were specifically investigating areas where our ships had landed, using equipment they claimed was designed to measure seismic activity and electromagnetic anomalies. Equipment that, despite its primitive appearance, was detecting our shielded installations. General Mordak's tentacles writhed with skepticism. Impossible. Our shields generate no detectable emissions. Even collective crystal tech can't penetrate hegemony cloaking. The humans weren't detecting our technology directly, Vexthal explained. They were detecting the absence of what should have been there, microscopic dust patterns that had been disturbed by our landing sequences. Slight variations in surface temperature where our thermal regulators were operating. Changes in the magnetic field readings that indicated large metal objects were present but invisible to their instruments. Dr. Yilson's mandibles clicked rapidly in what her species considered deep thought. Deductive reasoning based on environmental analysis. Primitive but surprisingly effective for a species without advanced scanning technology. It gets worse, Vexthal said. Within days of their initial investigations, they had triangulated the locations of all 12 observation posts. But instead of alerting their global military forces or attempting to establish contact, they did something we never anticipated. The holographic display shifted again, showing new data streams and communication intercepts. The information flow painted a picture that had kept hegemony analysts puzzled for months. They began feeding us false information. The chamber fell silent except for the ambient hum of life support systems. Representatives exchanged glances that crossed species lines, each recognizing the implications of what they were hearing. Every communication we intercepted, every database we accessed, every intelligence report we compiled, Vexthal continued, had been carefully crafted to present exactly the image they wanted us to see. Their military capabilities weren't primitive, they were deliberately concealed. Their political divisions weren't genuine conflicts, they were elaborate theater designed to make potential invaders underestimate their coordination. Senator Quillman's feathers shifted to display alarm patterns. You're suggesting they recognized the signs of pre-invasion reconnaissance and responded with a coordinated deception campaign? I'm not suggesting it, Vexthal replied grimly. I'm telling you that's exactly what happened. While we thought we were conducting covert surveillance on a divided primitive species, they were conducting counterintelligence operations against us, using methods we'd never encountered before. The tactical display zoomed out to show the broader Sol system, revealing patterns that had been invisible during the initial operation but were obvious in hindsight. Human space installations that seemed randomly positioned were actually optimally placed for defending against approach vectors from the galactic core. Their primitive rockets weren't limited by technology, but by treaty restrictions they'd negotiated among themselves. Their scattered military installations followed defensive patterns that would maximize coverage against orbital bombardment. How long? Ambassador Talara asked quietly. Before they revealed they knew you were there. Vexthal's electromagnetic field dimmed to almost nothing. They never revealed it directly. That's what made it so terrifying. For weeks they continued the charade, feeding us carefully constructed intelligence while simultaneously preparing countermeasures against every tactic in our standard invasion protocols. But surely you detected their preparations, General Mordak protested. Troop movements, weapon manufacturing, defensive installations. Everything they wanted us to see, Vexthal confirmed. Decoy facilities, fake communication networks, staged military exercises that demonstrated exactly the level of capability they wanted us to believe they possessed. Meanwhile, Their real preparations were happening in ways we couldn't detect because they were using methods we'd never encountered. The holographic display showed intercepted human communications from the period, translated into standard Galactic. News reports about scientific breakthroughs that seemed unrelated to military applications. Social media discussions about entertainment that contained embedded tactical information. Corporate communications about manufacturing quotas that were actually resource allocation to defense production. They were coordinating a planetary defense network through their global information system. Dr. Yilson realized, her voice carrying newfound respect. Using open communication channels that appeared to be carrying civilian data, but actually contained military intelligence distributed across their entire population. Every human on their planet became part of their intelligence network, Vexthal confirmed. From children reporting unusual sky phenomena to academic researchers analyzing atmospheric disturbances, they created a sensor network that spanned their entire world using nothing more sophisticated than personal communication devices and social coordination. The implications settled over the chamber like a heavy blanket. A species that could turn their entire civilization into a unified defense network without advanced technology was demonstrating capabilities that the hegemony's military doctrine had no provisions for addressing. When did you realize the extent of their capabilities? Ambassador Talara asked. Vextal's form seemed to shrink slightly, as if the memory physically weighed him down. When they made first contact. The holographic display shifted to show a new set of data, and every representative in the chamber leaned forward to study what they were seeing. Because what the display showed was impossible according to everything they understood about galactic civilization. They didn't wait for us to reveal ourselves, Vextal explained. 3 days before our scheduled first contact protocol, a single human spacecraft approached our primary observation post. Not a military vessel, not some primitive rocket, but a ship that shouldn't have existed. The technical specifications that filled the air around them defied understanding. The human craft used no technology that appeared in their databases, generated no energy signatures that their sensors could identify, and moved through space in ways that violated several established principles of physics. How is that possible? Dr. Yilson demanded. Our intelligence clearly showed they hadn't achieved faster-than-light travel. They hadn't, Vextal replied. That ship was using principles we don't understand, moving faster than light without creating the dimensional distortions that make FTL travel possible. And when it docked with our observation post, the being who emerged looked exactly like every other human we'd observed, except for one detail. The chamber waited in tense silence. She knew my name, Vexthal said quietly. She knew the names of every member of my reconnaissance team. She knew details about our mission that were classified at levels requiring Hegemony High Command clearance. And when I asked how she had obtained that information, she smiled. The word hung in the air like a threat. She said, Commander Vexthal, your species fights wars the way our children play games. You follow rules because you believe everyone else will follow them too. But we've been watching you watch us, and we've learned something important about the galaxy. And then she told me something that changed everything I thought I knew about warfare. Every representative in the chamber was motionless, waiting for the revelation that would reshape their understanding of galactic power structures. She said, We are the only species in this galaxy that learned to hunt before we learned to think. Every other civilization developed intelligence first, and then learned to use it for survival. But humans spent millions of years perfecting the art of killing before we developed technology. We are evolution's most successful predators given tools. The silence that followed was profound and disturbing. That's when she showed me what they had really been preparing while we watched them play primitive. The human woman who had introduced herself as Dr. Sarah Chen led Commander Vexthal through corridors that should not have existed. The observation post he had helped design was supposed to be a simple monitoring station, carved into lunar rock and equipped with basic life support systems. Instead, he found himself walking through passages that extended far deeper than their excavation equipment could have managed. Lined with materials that seemed to absorb sound and electromagnetic radiation in ways that defied his understanding of physics. You're wondering how we built this, Dr. Chen said without turning around, her voice carrying easily through the impossible architecture. The same way we've been building everything else. Very carefully, and with the understanding that sometimes the best place to hide something is exactly where your enemies expect to find it. Vexthal's sensory apparatus struggled to process what he was experiencing. The walls were definitely lunar rock, but they had been modified in ways that his species' advanced engineering couldn't replicate. Crystalline structures grew from the stone like organic circuits, pulsing with energy patterns that registered on none of his instruments but somehow felt familiar to something deep in his predator's instincts. This installation was built before we detected your first reconnaissance probe, Dr. Chen continued, leading him into a vast chamber that opened like a cathedral beneath the lunar surface. We've been preparing for first contact with galactic civilization for considerably longer than you might expect. The chamber was impossible. Vexthal's tactical training told him that the space they were walking through would have required excavation efforts that would be visible from orbit, but his advanced teams had detected nothing when they'd selected this location for their observation post. More disturbing still, the chamber was occupied. Hundreds of humans moved through the space with the efficient precision of a military operation, but they weren't wearing any uniforms or equipment that appeared in the intelligence reports his teams had compiled. Their clothing seemed to shift and adapt to their environment, providing protection that his sensors couldn't analyze. Their tools operated without any visible power source, manipulating matter and energy in ways that suggested they understood principles of physics that the hegemony's most advanced scientists had never discovered.
Impossible, Vextal whispered, his electromagnetic field fluctuating with shock.
Our orbital surveys showed no signs of construction activity, no energy signatures, no materials transport, no excavation. Dr. Chen smiled, and Vexthal realized with growing unease that human facial expressions conveyed far more information than his briefings had indicated. The warmth in her expression somehow made the display of teeth seem less threatening, while simultaneously making it clear that she was very much a predator who had chosen not to hunt. "That's because we didn't build this the way you would build it," she explained. "Your species, like most galactic civilizations, approaches engineering as a problem of imposing order on chaos. You design systems, manufacture components, and assemble them according to predetermined specifications. Very logical, very efficient, very detectable." She gestured toward the crystalline growths that lined the chamber walls. "We grew this, the same way we grew the ship that brought me to your observation post, the same way we grew the sensor network that's been monitoring your fleet movements for the past 3 months. Vexthal's training in xenobiology kicked in automatically. Organic engineering requires biological components that would show up on any deep scan analysis. The energy requirements alone would generate thermal signatures visible from orbit. And would they? Dr. Chen asked, her tone suggesting she was genuinely curious about his perspective. Or would they only generate the signatures you know how to look for? They paused at what appeared to be an observation deck overlooking the chamber's activities. From this vantage point, Vexthal could see that the humans below weren't just working, they were teaching each other. Groups clustered around displays and demonstrations, sharing information with an efficiency that suggested they were operating as a collective intelligence while maintaining individual autonomy. Your species analyzes energy signatures based on the assumption that technology requires external power sources. Chen continued. But what if technology could be powered by the same processes that power living organisms? What if manufacturing could be guided by the same principles that guide biological growth? A demonstration below caught Vexthal's attention. A human was manipulating what appeared to be raw lunar material, shaping it with bare hands into complex geometric forms that resembled components from advanced starship systems. But no tools were visible, no external energy sources, nothing that his sensors could identify as technology in any recognizable form. How? Was all he managed to ask. Practice, Dr. Chen replied simply. Thousands of years of practice. You see, Commander, your intelligence reports miss something crucial about human development. You focused on our external technology, our visible achievements, our recorded history. But you didn't look at what we were doing with our biology. She led him to another section of the chamber where humans were engaged in activities that challenged every assumption about biological limitations. Individuals were manipulating electromagnetic fields with the same precision that Vexthal's species required mechanical augmentation to achieve. Others were processing and sharing information at speeds that suggested direct neural networking without any visible technological interface. Every species in the galaxy developed intelligence as a tool for survival, Dr. Chen explained. They used their minds to create external technologies that enhanced their physical capabilities. But humans did something different. We spent millennia developing intelligence as a way to enhance our biological capabilities directly. The implication struck Vexthal like a physical blow, biological enhancement through mental discipline. Among other things, Dr. Chen agreed. You see, Commander, while you were observing what you thought was our primitive civilization, we were observing something far more interesting about your advanced one. She gestured toward displays that showed detailed schematics of hegemony ships, weapon systems, and military protocols. The level of detail was stunning, but what made Vexthul's carapace itch with alarm was the accompanying analysis. Every system had been studied not just for its capabilities, but for its weaknesses. Every protocol had been examined for exploitable flaws. Every weapon had been analyzed for potential countermeasures. We discovered that galactic civilization has become remarkably standardized, Dr. Mybork. Chen continued. The same basic technologies, the same tactical approaches, the same fundamental assumptions about how warfare should be conducted. It's very efficient, very logical, and very predictable. A new section of displays activated, showing what appeared to be real-time intelligence on hegemony fleet movements throughout the sector. Not just the reconnaissance teams that were supposedly conducting covert surveillance, but primary battle groups, support vessels, and command ships that should have been operating under complete stealth protocols. You've been monitoring our entire fleet, Vexthul realized with growing horror. Of course, Dr. Chen replied as if the observation was obvious. Did you really think we would prepare for first contact with just one reconnaissance group? Commander, we've been tracking your civilization's expansion across this galactic arm for the past 50 years. We know your standard operating procedures, your tactical preferences, your technological capabilities, and your political structure in considerable detail. The display shifted to show intelligence reports that made Vexthul's electromagnetic field spike with alarm. Detailed profiles of hegemony leadership, economic analysis of their resource distribution, tactical assessments of their military capabilities across multiple fronts. The humans hadn't just discovered that they were under observation. They had turned that observation into a comprehensive intelligence-gathering operation against the entire galactic hegemony. How? Vexthul asked again. But this time the question carried the weight of genuine fear. The same way we've been doing everything else, Dr. Chen replied. By paying attention to what you weren't paying attention to. You see, Commander, your civilization broadcasts enormous amounts of information without realizing it. Energy signatures from your ships, communication protocols that leak data, behavioral patterns that reveal tactical doctrine, resource requirements that indicate strategic planning. She led him to another observation area, where humans were analyzing streams of data that appeared to be intercepted communications from across hegemony space. The scope of the operation was staggering, suggesting an intelligence network that spanned multiple star systems and operated without any of the massive infrastructure that such capabilities should require. But more importantly, Dr. Chen continued, we learned something about your psychology that your own species doesn't seem to understand. You fight wars the way we used to play games when we were children. You follow rules because you believe rules make victory meaningful. You use specific tactics because you consider other approaches to be unsporting. You limit your weapons because you've agreed that certain forms of warfare are beneath civilized species. The observation deck they were standing on shifted, revealing that it was actually some form of adaptive technology that responded to the occupants' needs. The floor became transparent, allowing them to see multiple levels of activity, extending far deeper into the lunar installation than should have been possible. Humans don't have those limitations, Dr. Chen said quietly. We never developed the concept that warfare should be fair, or sporting, or limited by abstract principles of honor. We developed the concept that warfare should be won by whatever means necessary, as quickly and decisively as possible, with minimal risk to ourselves and maximum damage to anything that threatens our survival. Below them, Vexthul could see activities that made his military training scream warnings. Humans were constructing weapons that operated on principles he couldn't identify, developing countermeasures for threats they shouldn't have known existed, and coordinating strategies that seemed to account for scenarios that hegemony doctrine considered impossible. What are you preparing for? He asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Everything. Doctor, Chen replied. You see, Commander, we've learned that the galaxy is full of species that consider warfare to be a political tool, a way of negotiating resource distribution and territorial boundaries. But humans learned warfare as a survival mechanism, and we've never forgotten that lesson. The displays around them shifted to show tactical scenarios that Vexthul recognized from his own military training. Standard hegemony invasion protocols, orbital bombardment patterns, ground assault strategies. But alongside each scenario were human countermeasures that turned every apparent advantage into a potential vulnerability. Your standard orbital bombardment strategy relies on establishing and maintaining space superiority, Dr. Chen explained as the displays illustrated her points. But it assumes the target civilization will respond with conventional space-based defenses. What happens when the response comes from weapons that don't operate in space at all? One of the scenarios showed hegemony ships in standard bombardment formation, safely beyond the range of primitive surface-to-orbit weapons. Then the simulation showed those same ships being systematically destroyed by attacks that seemed to originate from the empty space around them. Impossible, Vexthal said automatically. There's nothing in empty space that could threaten shielded vessels. There is if you put it there first, Dr. Chen replied. Space isn't actually empty, Commander. It's full of particles, radiation, electromagnetic fields, and quantum fluctuations. Most civilizations learn to ignore those things because they don't seem useful. But humans learn to use everything available as a potential weapon. Another simulation showed ground-based attacks that bypassed orbital defenses entirely, striking at ships through dimensional pathways that conventional sensors couldn't detect. The technology involved was completely beyond anything in Vextal's experience, but the tactical principles were disturbingly familiar. Use the enemy's assumptions against them. Strike from unexpected directions. End the fight before the opponent realizes it has begun. You're talking about weapons that violate basic physical laws, Vexthal protested. We're talking about weapons that violate your understanding of physical laws, Dr. Chen corrected. There's a difference. Your species, like most galactic civilizations, learned physics by studying how the universe behaves under normal circumstances. But humans learn physics by studying how the universe behaves under extreme circumstances. She gestured toward displays showing experimental data that challenged fundamental assumptions about energy, matter, space, and time. Research that had been conducted not in advanced laboratories, but in natural settings where survival depended on understanding and exploiting every available resource. When you're persistence hunting across vast distances, you learn to manipulate probability and conservation laws in ways that civilized species would consider impossible. Dr. Chen explained. When you're coordinating pack behavior for maximum efficiency, you develop communication methods that operate faster than light without requiring technology. When you're adapting to hostile environments with limited resources, you learn to extract energy and materials from sources that advanced civilizations would overlook. The scope of what she was describing was staggering. An entire species that had developed capabilities that functioned as advanced technology while remaining undetectable to conventional analysis. Biological modifications that provided abilities equivalent to mechanical augmentation, consciousness techniques that enabled direct manipulation of physical forces, coordination methods that allowed billions of individuals to function as a unified intelligence while maintaining personal autonomy. Commander, Dr. Chen said as they reached what appeared to be the central command area of the installation. I want you to understand something important before you report back to your superiors. Humans didn't choose to become apex predators. Evolution chose for us. We spent millions of years competing with other predator species for the right to survive, and we won that competition by becoming better at hunting than anything else on our planet. The central command area contained displays showing real-time tactical information about the entire Sol system. Defense networks that spanned multiple planets and asteroid installations. Weapon systems that operated on principles that hegemony science couldn't explain, and coordination systems that connected every human in the system into a unified command structure. Every human you've observed, every individual you've catalogued as a potential asset or threat, has been shaped by millions of years of evolutionary pressure that selected for one primary trait. Dr. Chen continued, the ability to identify, track, and eliminate any threat to our survival. A final display activated, showing what appeared to be a tactical analysis of every hegemony ship, installation, and strategic asset within 50 light-years of Earth. The detail was comprehensive, and the targeting solutions were already calculated. So when the hegemony decides to declare war on humanity, Dr. Chen said with the same pleasant smile she had maintained throughout their conversation, please make sure your leadership understands what they're really choosing to fight. She handed Vexthal a small device that his scanners couldn't identify. This contains everything we've learned about your civilization, along with our preliminary analysis of how we would conduct a war against the galactic hegemony, if one became necessary. Consider it our first diplomatic communication. Vexthal stared at the device, realizing with growing horror that it probably contained information that would revolutionize hegemony understanding of warfare, while simultaneously making it clear that such understanding would be useless against opponents who had already moved beyond conventional tactical thinking. What do you want? He asked finally. The same thing every predator wants, Dr. Chen replied. To be left alone to hunt in our own territory. But if your species decides that's not acceptable, then we'll remind the galaxy why evolution made us very, very good at eliminating competition. The emergency council chamber on Zephyr Station had fallen into a silence so profound that the ambient hum of life support systems seemed deafening. Commander Vextol stood motionless at the center, the small device Dr. Chen had given him resting in his scarred appendage like a miniature weapon of mass destruction. Around him, the representatives of 17 species processed the implications of what they had heard with the slow horror of civilizations realizing their fundamental assumptions about reality were wrong. Ambassador Talara's crystalline form had dimmed to almost complete transparency, a sign of deep shock among her people.
Commander, you're describing capabilities that should be impossible for a species that hasn't achieved faster-than-light travel. That's what I thought too, Vextol replied quietly, until I activated the device she gave me. General Mordak's tentacles writhed with aggressive posturing that failed to conceal his underlying nervousness.
A single human female convinced you that their primitive civilization poses a threat to the galactic hegemony? Commander, I respect your service record, but this sounds like psychological manipulation designed to prevent a simple conquest operation.
Vextol's electromagnetic field flickered with bitter amusement. General, I hope you maintain that perspective when you review the intelligence data, because what I learned in the 3 hours I spent studying their diplomatic communication changed everything I thought I understood about warfare. He placed the device on the chamber's central analysis platform, where it was immediately surrounded by the most advanced scanning equipment the hegemony possessed. Energy dampeners activated to contain any potential threats, while sensor arrays began analyzing the object from every possible angle.
Doctor! Yilson leaned forward in her adaptive seating, her compound eyes reflecting professional curiosity. Initial scans show no recognizable technology patterns. No power source, no data storage systems, no transmission capabilities. Commander, this appears to be a simple crystalline structure with no functional components.
That's what our equipment detected too, Vextol confirmed. Until I followed Dr. Petitic.
Chen's instructions for activation. Which were? Senator Quillman asked, his metallic feathers displaying patterns of skeptical interest.
Think about warfare. The chamber erupted in confused discussions as representatives tried to process the absurdity of that instruction. Senator Quillman's feathers shifted to aggressive display patterns.
Commander, you're claiming that human technology operates through mental interface? That's impossible without neural implants, and our scans clearly show this object contains no technological components.
Try it, Vextol said simply. Think about any military scenario, any tactical situation, any warfare-related concept. Focus that thought toward the device. General Mordak's skepticism was evident in every movement of his tentacles, but his curiosity overcame his doubt. He directed his attention toward the small crystal, considering the tactical challenges of his upcoming human conquest mission. The device activated. Light erupted from the crystal in patterns that bypassed the chamber's sensors entirely, projecting information directly into the consciousness of every being present. But it wasn't visual display or auditory transmission. It was direct knowledge transfer that somehow conveyed complex data at speeds that made normal communication seem glacially slow. The first wave of information was tactical analysis of the hegemony's current fleet disposition. Every ship, every crew assignment, every supply route, every strategic weakness. The data was comprehensive, accurate, and absolutely classified. Information that should have been impossible for any external force to obtain was being displayed with casual precision that suggested the humans had been monitoring hegemony operations as easily as reading public broadcasts. But the tactical intelligence was just the beginning. The second wave showed theoretical scenarios for warfare between human and hegemony forces, battle plans that accounted for every standard hegemony strategy and demonstrated countermeasures that turned apparent advantages into vulnerabilities. Orbital bombardment protocols were neutralized by weapons that operated outside normal space. Ground invasion strategies were defeated by defensive systems that treated entire planets as integrated weapons platforms. Fleet engagements were dominated by attack methods that ignored shields, armor, and conventional physics entirely. Dr. Yilson's scientific training kicked in automatically as she tried to process the implications. The energy requirements for these weapons systems would require power generation capabilities equivalent to stellar output. No civilization could achieve those energy levels without massive industrial infrastructure that would be visible across multiple star systems. The device responded to her thoughts by providing detailed explanations of human energy technology. Power systems that operated by manipulating fundamental forces at the quantum level, extracting unlimited energy from seemingly empty space through principles that made hegemony fusion reactors look like primitive combustion engines. Manufacturing processes that created complex systems by guiding natural physical processes rather than imposing artificial structure on raw materials. Ambassador Talara's form flickered with patterns of growing alarm. These technologies violate conservation laws, thermodynamic principles, and basic physics. How could any species develop capabilities that contradict universal constants? Again, the device responded with information that challenged fundamental assumptions. Humans hadn't developed technology that violated physical laws, they had developed understanding of physical laws that galactic science hadn't discovered. Quantum mechanics that extended beyond standard models, dimensional physics that operated on scales both larger and smaller than conventional theory suggested, consciousness research that revealed connections between mental processes and fundamental forces. Senator Quillman attempted to approach the problem from a different angle. Even if these technologies were possible, developing them would require research infrastructure, testing facilities, resource allocation on planetary scales. Our surveillance detected none of these indicators. The third wave of information from the device was the most disturbing yet. It showed human development processes that bore no resemblance to anything in galactic experience. Instead of building massive research installations, humans had learned to use their own biology as experimental equipment. Instead of constructing testing facilities, they had developed mental techniques that allowed direct manipulation of physical forces. Instead of requiring planetary resources, they had learned to extract materials and energy from sources that conventional science considered empty space.
General Mordak's aggressive posturing had completely disappeared, replaced by the stillness of a predator recognizing a superior threat.
You're claiming that humans achieved advanced technological capabilities through individual biological modification, rather than external industrial development.
I'm not claiming anything, Vexthal replied.
I'm showing you what they showed me, and there's more. The fourth wave of information revealed the scope of human capabilities beyond their home system. Observation posts that operated throughout the local galactic region, monitoring the activities of every spacefaring civilization. Intelligence networks that tracked political developments, technological advances, and strategic planning across multiple species. Defensive preparations that treated potential galactic war as a statistical probability that required comprehensive planning. Dr. Yulson's scientific objectivity was clearly struggling with what she was observing. Commander, if this data is accurate, then humans have achieved surveillance capabilities that span hundreds of star systems without using any detectable technology. They've developed strategic intelligence about civilizations they've never officially contacted. How could this be possible? The device provided answers that redefined the concept of surveillance. Humans had learned to gather information using methods that operated outside electromagnetic spectrum detection, observation techniques that required no physical presence at the target location. Intelligence gathering that relied on analyzing the quantum resonance patterns that all consciousness generated simply by existing. The implications were staggering. Humans hadn't just been watching the hegemony's reconnaissance mission. They had been monitoring every major galactic civilization for decades, gathering intelligence through methods that were undetectable because they operated on principles that galactic science didn't recognize as possible. Ambassador Tulara's voice carried the weight of civilizational shock when she finally spoke. If humans can monitor any location in the galaxy without physical presence, if they can gather intelligence through undetectable means, if they can manipulate physical forces directly through consciousness techniques, then, she paused, struggling with the implications. Then every military secret, every strategic plan, every technological development in galactic civilization has been compromised. Yes, Vexthal confirmed quietly. And that's still not the worst part. The fifth wave of information revealed human strategic planning for potential galactic war. Not defensive strategies designed to protect their home system, but offensive capabilities designed to eliminate threats across interstellar distances. Weapon systems that could target any location in the galaxy from their solar system. Attack methods that could disable or destroy technological civilizations without conventional military engagement. Strategic plans that treated galactic conquest not as territorial expansion, but as threat elimination. Senator Quillman's metallic feathers had lost all coloration, displaying the avian equivalent of terror. They're not planning to defend themselves against galactic civilization. They're planning to eliminate it entirely if it becomes necessary. The device responded to his thought by showing detailed scenarios for systematic dismantling of galactic civilization's technological infrastructure. Not through military conquest or territorial occupation, but through selective application of techniques that would reduce advanced civilizations to pre-technological status while leaving their populations largely unharmed. The method was as elegant as it was terrifying. Rather than destroying civilizations through conventional warfare, humans could simply disable the technology that made interstellar civilization possible. Ships would become inoperable. Communication systems would fail. Manufacturing systems would stop functioning. Advanced civilizations would find themselves isolated on their homeworlds, reduced to local technological levels, while human capabilities remained completely unaffected.
General Mordak's tentacles had curled into defensive positions as he processed the strategic implications. They could end galactic civilization without firing a shot.
Just turn off our technology and let natural limitations isolate every species to their home systems. But that's still not the worst part, Vexthal said, his voice carrying the weight of someone who had seen the bottom of an abyss that extended far deeper than anyone had imagined. The sixth and final wave of information revealed human psychological profiles of every major species in galactic civilization. Not just behavioral analysis or cultural studies, but deep understanding of how each species thought, what motivated them, how they made decisions under stress, what fears drove their strategic planning. Dr. Brand, Yilson's scientific training allowed her to recognize the implications immediately. They've been studying us the way we study primitive species, cataloging our behavioral patterns, identifying our psychological weaknesses, developing strategies for managing our responses to various stimuli. The device showed detailed profiles that demonstrated human understanding of galactic psychology at levels that would have required centuries of careful study. They knew which species would respond to threats with aggression versus submission. They understood which civilizations valued honor over survival and which would abandon principles to preserve their populations. They had identified the psychological triggers that could cause alliances to collapse, economic systems to fail, and political structures to fragment. Ambassador Talara's crystalline form had become almost completely invisible as she processed the full scope of what they were seeing. They don't just have superior technology. They understand us better than we understand ourselves. They know exactly how we think, how we react, how we'll respond to any scenario they choose to create. And that, Vexthal said quietly, is when I realized what Dr. Chen had been trying to tell me about humans being apex predators. The device deactivated, leaving the chamber in silence that felt heavy with the weight of civilizational revelation.
Around the analysis platform, 17 species' most experienced diplomats and military leaders sat in stunned recognition that everything they had assumed about galactic power structures was wrong. Commander, General Mordak said finally, his voice lacking any of its earlier aggressive confidence. What exactly did this Dr.
Chen say when you asked her what humans wanted from galactic civilization? Vexthal's electromagnetic field dimmed to almost nothing as he remembered those final moments in the lunar installation. She said that humans had spent 50,000 years learning to hunt everything on their planet more effectively than any other predator, and that now they had learned to hunt civilizations. The silence that followed Vexthal's final revelation stretched until Senator Quillman's metallic feathers began displaying patterns of desperate hope. Commander, surely you're not suggesting that humans view galactic civilization as prey to be hunted? Vexthal's response carried the weight of someone who had stared into an abyss and found something staring back.
I'm not suggesting anything, Senator.
I'm telling you what Dr. Chen explained to me with perfect clarity and disturbing pride. He activated his personal holographic display, showing the final recordings from his encounter in the lunar installation. The image of Dr. Chen appeared in the center of the chamber, her human features displaying that characteristic expression that hegemony xenopsychology had consistently failed to interpret correctly. We spent the last hour of my visit discussing what she called civilizational dynamics. Vexthal continued. Dr. Chen wanted me to understand that humans don't view galactic civilization as a political entity to be negotiated with or a military force to be defeated. They view it as an ecosystem to be managed. The recording activated, filling the chamber with Dr. Konba Chen's voice as she explained concepts that challenged every assumption about interspecies relations. Commander Vexthal, your civilization operates under the assumption that intelligence naturally leads to cooperation, that advanced species will recognize mutual benefit in peaceful coexistence. But that assumption is based on studying species that developed intelligence as a tool for survival in stable environments. Her image gestured toward displays showing comparative evolutionary data. Humans developed intelligence as a tool for survival in an environment where everything was trying to kill us. Our planet produced predator species with capabilities that made survival require constant adaptation, innovation, and tactical thinking. We didn't develop intelligence to build cities and create art and explore the universe. We developed intelligence to identify, track, and eliminate anything that threatened our survival. Dr. Yilson interrupted the recording with a clicking sound of scientific objection. But humans did build cities, create art, and explore the universe. Their civilization demonstrates clear evidence of cooperative behavior and peaceful cultural development.
Vexthal's electromagnetic field flickered with something that might have been amusement if Krallians were capable of finding anything about their situation amusing. That's exactly what I said to her. And her response changed everything I thought I understood about human psychology. The recording continued with Dr. Per Chen's explanation. Commander, those achievements happened after we eliminated everything on our planet that was trying to kill us. Cities became possible when we hunted predator species to extinction or drove them into isolated territories where they couldn't threaten human settlements. Art became possible when we developed such efficient hunting techniques that survival no longer required all our time and attention. Space exploration became possible when we had hunted everything on Earth so effectively that we needed to find new territories to explore. Ambassador Talara's crystalline form flickered with patterns of growing alarm. She's describing human civilization as the result of successful predator dominance rather than cooperative social development. Exactly, Vexthal confirmed. And then she explained how humans view galactic civilization through that same lens. The recording shifted to show Dr. Chen discussing concepts that made every military strategist in the chamber feel a chill that had nothing to do with atmospheric control. When humans first detected evidence of galactic civilization, our initial response wasn't excitement about contact with other intelligent species. It was strategic analysis of potential threats and opportunities. We approached galactic civilization the same way our ancestors approached any new territory, by identifying what lived there, what might try to kill us, and what we might need to hunt. General Mordak's tentacles writhed with defensive posturing. But humans haven't demonstrated aggressive behavior toward any galactic civilization. If they view us as potential prey, why haven't they acted on those instincts? The recording provided an answer that was somehow more disturbing than outright aggression would have been. Because we've been studying you, Doctor, Chan explained to Vexthal's past self. The same way our ancestors studied herd animals before developing hunting strategies. We needed to understand your behavioral patterns, your social structures, your technological capabilities, and your psychological responses to various stimuli. She gestured toward displays showing 50 years of accumulated intelligence on galactic civilization. Every spacefaring species follows remarkably similar patterns. You develop technology to escape the limitations of your homeworld. You establish colonies to access additional resources. You form alliances to share the cost of expansion. And you create political structures to manage conflicts over territory and resources. Very predictable, very logical, very manageable. Dr. Urs. Yulson's scientific training allowed her to recognize the implications immediately. She's describing galactic civilization as if it were a natural system that could be understood through observation and controlled through selective intervention. That's exactly what she was describing, Vexthal confirmed grimly. And then she showed me how humans had been testing their theories. The recording shifted to show documentation of incidents that had occurred throughout galactic civilization over the past 50 years. Political crises that had emerged from seemingly random events. Technological failures that had affected multiple species simultaneously, economic disruptions that had altered resource distribution patterns, military conflicts that had erupted from minor territorial disputes, events that galactic historians had recorded as natural consequences of civilizational complexity were revealed to be carefully orchestrated experiments in social manipulation. The Zephyrian Rebellion, Dr. Chen explained in the recording, was initiated when we introduced specific information into their communication networks. Information designed to trigger known psychological responses that would lead to predictable political outcomes. We wanted to observe how the hegemony would respond to internal dissent versus external threats. Senator Quilmon's feathers displayed patterns of horrified recognition. The rebellion that cost us 3 years and thousands of lives was a human experiment? The recording continued with Dr. Chen's explanation. The Silicon Wars resulted from selective technological disruption. We wanted to understand how galactic civilization would adapt to sudden loss of specific manufacturing capabilities. The observation data helped us develop strategies for more comprehensive technological intervention if it became necessary. Ambassador Talara's voice carried the weight of civilizational shock.
They've been manipulating galactic history for 50 years as part of a long-term study program?
Not just studying, Bextel corrected. Training. The final section of the recording revealed the most disturbing aspect of human strategic planning.
Dr. Chen explained that every intervention, every experiment, every manipulation of galactic events had been designed not just to gather intelligence, but to condition galactic civilization's responses to human influence. We've been teaching you to react to our stimuli in predictable ways, she explained to Vextel's recorded image.
Political leaders throughout galactic civilization now make decisions based on information they don't realize comes from human sources. Military strategists plan operations using tactical doctrine that incorporates human psychological manipulation. Economic systems operate using resource allocation models that include human behavioral modification. The implications were staggering. Galactic civilization hadn't been developing independently for the past 50 years. It had been unconsciously adapting to human management, becoming increasingly dependent on guidance that appeared to come from internal sources, but actually originated from an external intelligence that was manipulating the entire system for purposes that remained unclear. General Mordak's aggressive posturing had completely disappeared, replaced by the stillness of someone realizing their entire strategic worldview was based on false assumptions. "They've been domesticating us." "Yes," Bextel confirmed, "the same way human ancestors domesticated other species on their planet, through selective breeding, behavioral modification, and environmental management that made dependence on human guidance seem like natural development." Dr. Yilson's scientific objectivity was struggling with implications that challenged every assumption about social evolution. But domestication requires generations of selective pressure. How could humans achieve civilizational domestication in only 50 years? The recording provided an explanation that redefined concepts of social manipulation. "Civilizations adapt much faster than biological species," Dr. Chen had explained. "Political structures, economic systems, and military doctrine can be modified within single generations through careful application of appropriate pressures. And galactic civilization is particularly susceptible to management because all your species share similar assumptions about how advanced society should operate." She showed Vexthor examples of how human influence had gradually shaped galactic development. Trade agreements that seemed beneficial to all parties but actually concentrated strategic resources under human indirect control. Military alliances that appeared to strengthen member species, but actually made them dependent on coordination systems that humans could disable at will. Technological sharing programs that seemed to accelerate galactic advancement, but actually introduced vulnerabilities that only humans understood how to exploit. "The beauty of the system," Dr. Chen had explained with obvious pride, "is that it makes human dominance appear to be galactic civilization's own choice. Every species believes they're making independent decisions that benefit their own interests. They don't realize that all their options have been carefully designed to lead toward outcomes that serve human strategic objectives." Ambassador Talara's form had become almost completely transparent as she processed the full scope of human manipulation. "We haven't been developing galactic civilization. We've been unconsciously building a system that makes us dependent on human management while believing we're maintaining our independence. And now," Vixthul said quietly, "they're ready to reveal that dependence." The final section of the recording showed Dr. Ruzare Chen explaining the next phase of human strategic planning. "Commander, the hegemony's decision to declare war on humanity represents a perfect opportunity to demonstrate the realities of galactic power structures. Your military leadership believes they're planning an invasion of a primitive species. What they're actually doing is triggering a controlled demonstration of human capabilities." She gestured toward tactical displays showing comprehensive preparations for what she called civilizational revelation. Every aspect of the hegemony's invasion plan has been anticipated and countered, but more importantly, every aspect has been designed to showcase specific human capabilities to the rest of galactic civilization in ways that will reshape everyone's understanding of what's possible. The implications struck every representative in the chamber simultaneously. The human response to hegemony aggression wouldn't be desperate defense by a primitive species. It would be a carefully choreographed demonstration of superior capabilities designed to establish human dominance over galactic civilization in a way that would be undeniable, comprehensive, and permanent. General Mordak's voice carried the weight of someone realizing their entire military career had been based on illusions. "The war isn't about territorial conquest or resource access. It's about revealing who's actually been in control of galactic civilization for the past 50 years. "Exactly," Vexthal confirmed. "And Dr. Chen wanted to make absolutely certain that I understood what would happen to any species that chose to resist that revelation." The final holographic recording showed Dr. Sarah Chen standing in what appeared to be an observation deck overlooking the vast human installation beneath the lunar surface. But Vexthal now understood that everything about that installation defied conventional understanding of engineering, physics, and biological limitations. The humans below weren't just working, they were demonstrating capabilities that redefined what individual consciousness could achieve when properly developed. "Commander Vexthal." Dr. Chen's recorded voice carried a tone of patient instruction, like a teacher explaining fundamental concepts to a student who is struggling with basic principles. "Before you return to your superiors with this intelligence,
I want to show you something that will help them understand their situation more clearly. The recording showed Dr.
Chen activating a display that revealed real-time tactical information about the entire hegemony fleet structure. Not just the ships currently in the Sol system, but every military vessel, supply convoy, command installation, and strategic asset across 3 galaxy arms.
The detail was comprehensive, current, and absolutely impossible according to everything Vexthal had learned about intelligence gathering during his military career. This is our current surveillance coverage of hegemony military assets, Dr.
Chen explained casually, as if monitoring an entire galactic civilization's military infrastructure was a routine administrative task. We've been tracking your fleet movements, crew rotations, supply requirements, maintenance schedules, and tactical planning for the past 18 months.
But the display showed more than just surveillance data. It showed targeting solutions.
Every hegemony ship had been analyzed for structural vulnerabilities, crew psychology, technological weaknesses, and strategic importance. Attack vectors had been calculated that could disable or destroy each vessel through methods that bypassed conventional defensive systems entirely. The scope was staggering, but what made Vextal's carapace itch with terror was the efficiency of the planning. We could eliminate your entire fleet structure within approximately 4 hours, Dr. Ick.
Chen continued with the same conversational tone she might use to discuss weather patterns. Not through conventional space combat, which would require us to build visible military infrastructure, but through selective application of techniques that operate outside your defensive doctrine. The tactical display zoomed in on specific examples. Hegemony dreadnoughts that could be disabled by weapons that attack their power systems through dimensional pathways that shields couldn't detect. Command ships that could be neutralized by psychological warfare techniques that would cause crew breakdown without any external assault. Supply convoys that could be eliminated by manipulating the quantum probability fields that govern their navigation systems. In the council chamber on Zephyr Station, General Mordak's tentacles had curled into defensive positions as he processed implications that challenged every assumption about military superiority. They're claiming they could destroy the entire hegemony fleet without engaging in recognizable combat? They're not claiming anything, Vexthal replied quietly.
They're stating facts. And, Dr. Barbas.
Chen wanted to make sure I understood that fleet elimination was just the beginning. The recording continued with Dr. Chen's explanation of human capabilities beyond conventional warfare. Of course, destroying your military assets would only be necessary if we intended to rule galactic civilization through direct force. But humans learned long ago that domination through violence is inefficient and unstable. It's much more effective to establish control through dependency. She gestured toward new displays showing economic analysis of galactic civilization that revealed patterns of resource distribution, trade relationships, and technological exchange that had been carefully orchestrated to serve human strategic objectives.
Every major economic system in galactic space was somehow dependent on supply chains, manufacturing processes, or resource allocation systems that could be disrupted by selective human intervention. Your civilizations have been unconsciously adapted to function within parameters that we can control.
Dr. Chen explained. Food production systems that rely on agricultural techniques we've subtly influenced. Manufacturing processes that depend on materials we've ensured you have access to. Transportation networks that use navigation protocols we've helped you develop. Communication systems that operate through relay networks we've helped you establish. The implications were staggering. Galactic civilization hadn't achieved independence from their home systems through their own technological advancement. They had achieved apparent independence through unconscious adoption of systems that made them dependent on human management for basic survival functions. Dr. Yulson's scientific training allowed her to recognize the scope of what they were seeing. They've created a situation where galactic civilization requires human support for fundamental life support systems without realizing that dependence exists. Exactly, Vexthal confirmed. And Dr. Chen wanted to demonstrate what would happen if that support was withdrawn. The recording showed Dr. Chen activating what she called a dependency analysis simulation. The display illustrated how selective disruption of human-influenced systems would affect each galactic civilization within timeframes measured in weeks rather than years. Agricultural systems would fail when carefully balanced soil treatment programs were interrupted, leading to food shortages that would force populations to focus on immediate survival rather than military operations. Manufacturing systems would break down when access to specific materials was restricted, making it impossible to maintain technological infrastructure. Transportation networks would become unreliable when navigation systems lost access to subtle guidance corrections, isolating colonies and making coordinated military action impossible.
We could reduce galactic civilization to pre-spaceflight technological levels without destroying a single ship or harming any individual, Dr. Chen explained. Simply by withdrawing support systems that your species didn't realize you were depending on. Ambassador Talara's crystalline form had become almost completely invisible as she processed the full scope of human strategic planning. They could end galactic civilization by stopping helping us? But that's still not the most disturbing part, Vexthal said, his electromagnetic field dimming to almost nothing. Dr. Chen wanted to make sure I understood that humans consider dependency management to be their most merciful option. The final section of the recording revealed human capabilities that challenged fundamental assumptions about consciousness, reality, and the nature of existence itself. Dr. Chen showed Vexthal examples of what she called consciousness restructuring techniques that could alter the basic psychological patterns that define species identity. If dependency management proves insufficient to maintain galactic stability, she explained with the same clinical objectivity she had maintained throughout their conversation, we have developed methods for modifying species behavior at levels that would make resistance impossible rather than just impractical. The display showed psychological modification techniques that operated by altering the fundamental thought patterns that determined how each species perceived reality, processed information, and made decisions. Not mind control in any recognizable sense, but comprehensive restructuring of consciousness that would make specific thought patterns impossible, while leaving individuals convinced they were thinking independently. We could modify galactic psychology so that concepts like independence and resistance would become literally unthinkable, Dr. Chen continued. Each species would retain their cultural identity, their technological capabilities, and their social structures. They would simply lose the ability to conceive of existence outside human guidance. Senator Quillman's metallic feathers had lost all coloration as he processed implications that transcended political or military concerns and entered the realm of existential horror. They're talking about altering the nature of consciousness itself? As a last resort, Vexthal confirmed. Dr. Chen emphasized that humans prefer managing galactic civilization through subtle influence rather than direct control. But she wanted me to understand that they possess capabilities that make resistance ultimately meaningless regardless of how it's attempted. The recording showed Dr. Chen's final message to the galactic hegemony leadership. Commander, please ensure that your superiors understand the choice they're making when they decide whether to proceed with their invasion plans. They can choose to acknowledge human authority over galactic affairs and transition to a managed relationship that preserves their autonomy within acceptable parameters, or they can choose to maintain the illusion of independence and discover what happens when humans stop being subtle about their capabilities. She gestured toward the displays showing real-time monitoring of hegemony fleet movements. We know exactly where every ship is positioned, what orders they've received, and what tactical plans they intend to execute. We have countermeasures prepared for every strategy in their doctrine, weapon systems they can't detect, deployed against targets they don't know are vulnerable, and fallback options that would make conventional victory impossible regardless of how the conflict develops. The recording paused on Dr. Chen's final words to Vexthal. But most importantly, Commander, we have patience. Humans spent 50,000 years learning to hunt. And we learned that the most successful hunters are the ones who never rush. We've been preparing for this moment for 50 years, studying every aspect of galactic civilization and developing comprehensive strategies for every possible scenario. Her expression shifted to display something that Vexthal had finally learned to recognize as predatory satisfaction. Your species has 3 options. They can surrender immediately and accept managed integration into human-controlled galactic civilization. They can resist conventionally and provide us with an opportunity to demonstrate our capabilities to the rest of galactic civilization in ways that will make future resistance unthinkable. Or they can attempt to escape to unknown regions of the galaxy and discover that humans have been monitoring and preparing for that possibility as well. The recording ended with Dr. Chen's final statement. Please tell your leadership that humans are apex predators who have learned to hunt civilizations. We've identified galactic civilization as our territory, catalogued every species as either useful or threatening, and developed comprehensive strategies for managing both categories. The only choice your species has is whether they want to discover our capabilities through cooperation or through demonstration. The council chamber fell into a silence that seemed to compress the very air they were breathing. Around the central analysis platform, 17 species' most experienced diplomats and military leaders sat in stunned recognition that everything they had assumed about their place in the galactic hierarchy was wrong. General Morduck spoke first. his voice lacking any trace of the aggressive confidence that had characterized his earlier statements. "Commander, in your professional military assessment, what are the chances that Dr. Chen was exaggerating human capabilities for psychological warfare purposes?" Vexthal's response carried the weight of someone who had stared into an abyss that extended far deeper than anyone had imagined. "General, I spent 3 months analyzing every piece of intelligence they provided, every technical specification, every tactical scenario, every strategic capability they demonstrated. All of it checks out. All of it is possible according to physics that we didn't know existed. All of it is backed by observational evidence that we can verify independently." He gestured toward the device Dr. Peniton Chen had given him, which still rested on the analysis platform like a small monument to human superiority. "But more importantly, everything they've predicted about our behavior has proven accurate. They told me exactly how this emergency council would react to their intelligence, exactly what questions would be asked, exactly what concerns would be raised. They've been managing this conversation through me, without any of us realizing it." Ambassador Talara's voice carried the weight of civilizational despair when she finally spoke. "Then we're not deciding whether to proceed with the invasion. We're deciding whether to surrender immediately or provide humans with an excuse to demonstrate their superiority to the rest of galactic civilization." "That's correct," Vextal confirmed. "And Dr. Chen wanted me to emphasize one final point. Humans consider patience to be a virtue, that they consider resistance to their authority to be a threat to their survival. And when human survival is threatened, they respond with capabilities that make what I've shown you look like diplomatic courtesy." The chamber fell silent again as the representatives of 17 species contemplated the end of everything they had believed about galactic civilization, political independence, and their species' place in the universe. In that silence, the future of galactic civilization would be decided not by the species who thought they ruled it, but by the apex predators who had been patiently teaching them to be prey.